All right, glue up. Glue up for our doors. So this is a door. We'll do the same thing with our drawers, but essentially some things that we need. We've got our bucket of water with a towel in there. We have some glue. I've got a couple of clamps, and I'll show you what I'll use those for here in a moment. A couple things about how to set your clamps up. You got everything dry fit, so you're just going to pull something off of the stack, set it on top of your clamps. You're going to leave yourself, you know, at least half an inch over here. I'll show you why here in a second. And you want to back that off about an inch, because we want to be able to scooch our stile off of our rails here in just a moment, and that'll give us a little bit of space, maybe an inch and a half back there will help us do that. But essentially doing everything that you can, because once you put the glue on there and put the pieces together, you've got about 8 to 10 minutes before that stuff starts tacking up. We've got a little protective vinyl underneath here so we don't get anything dripped on our work surface. And again, it's very important to have coffee. Big mug. Alright, so I just pulled my cabinet door apart, just laid it right here. I've got my 2 rails ready to be glued up. I'm actually just going to put them both right there, and I'm going to put glue on them. And remember, we're only going to glue basically from here back on our shoulder, and we'll glue our entire tenon. The reason I don't want to get any closer than that is because I start getting squeeze out, I may get it onto my panel. It'll end up in the corner, and if it ends up in the corner, I can't really sand that off very well. So that's going to be a problem when I put that stain on there. It will not soak in right there because it's covered up with glue. I've essentially sealed the wood off. So I'm gonna glue from here back and put some glue on my shoulder. Remember, this up here is pretty easy to sand. So I'll wipe off, and then I'm gonna sand this afterwards up top. So I can get squeeze out up here, that's okay. I just don't want to get too much in here. Do not put any glue on the inside of this dado. You do not need glue in here for a panel. Okay, no. Okay, I've got to hurry. I've got glue on there. I've got glue on my shoulders and on my tenons. I've done the best, do the best you can to get your tenons to line up. You don't really want anything poking out, or you don't want your rails sticking out. Gluing up, it's nice to have them start out a little proud, because then it's a lot easier to kind of tap in with a little hammer and to get them nice and even. If you want to, you can make a little tap block. Just tighten it up a little bit, not a lot. Tighten it up a little bit, and then tap on this to get them even. It's a little more difficult if you start out with them with your rails in there, trying to get them out here. Then you got to tap in here, and you don't have much of a lip, and you can dent it and whatnot. So you can see I've got a little squeeze out. No biggie. I'll take my rag. Just gonna wipe that down. Wipe off these corners. All right, check the inside corners. Notice I did a good job there of not getting any squeeze out in those corners. It's okay if I get it out here, because I can sand this away pretty easy. I can also wipe it. Sorry about the terrible camera work. All right. I've seen people glue these things up with these laying on their sides, you know, clamping them. No, put them down. Rest that door on the bar. These feet are cambered in a little bit anyway. Okay, so to over exaggerate, they're both like, this foot's kind of in like this. So as you squeeze it, it naturally squeezes this piece down. If you lay it on its side, you're really only squeezing here on the tips, okay? And you could still get bow in it. So do them like this, and I'm going to show you another reason why you want to do them like this here in just a second. Okay, so I'm going to flip this up. Now, I've got I'm probably turning maybe, you know, 20 pounds of pressure maybe. Let me pause the camera and I'm gonna turn this around. All right, now I've got squeeze out on the back. That's okay, it's the back of the door. Again, I just come in here, just wipe that off. Again, this is really easy to sand. This isn't like making a cutting board. We don't need to have a whole bunch of squeeze out all over the place. Doesn't need to get real messy. All right, so wipe that down like that. Now, and again, I can sand this real easy if I get squeeze out. Putting your clamps like this is another reason you want to put them this way, so I can stand these things up. If you were to have your clamp going like this way, kind of laying on their side, I couldn't stand it up like this and I wouldn't be able to wipe it off in the back. So, two good reasons to do it this way. These clamps are naturally pulling, just the way these are set up on this bar, they're naturally squeezing in from the top and pinching this piece onto this bar. Okay. Now this is real world woodworking here. I know a lot of people are looking at that going, God, Vic, you stink. What kind of joint is that? Well, that is pretty bad, I'll admit to you. You know, it's not good. I got saw marks in it because I was using a dull saw blade, which is not safe. Don't do that. But what we're going to do is put a little stainable wood filler in there. I just wiped them off with water, so I'm going to let them dry off a little bit. Let's check out the other side. See, I got nasty saw marks up here. That's okay. We'll get all that off on the edge bander. Edge sander, not edge bander. Sorry, guy. No offense. That's the edge bander over there. Sorry, buddy. All right, this one's better over here. Now, one good thing about wiping some water in there, some of you very astute woodworkers will understand that anytime you put water on wood, it's going to cause it to expand a little bit, and that's true. So these things might tighten up a little bit if you do a wet, you know, kind of a soaking wipe with it. It could swell up. We don't want to do that too much. Same is true. It could swell up too much out here, but you know, closing that gap there is a good thing. So we'll wait here just a couple of minutes and put a little wood filler in there. Actually, before we get to the wood filler, I forgot to mention one reason I have this taped caul. And to back up, some people like to put a caul on the front and back of their doors. I really don't find that necessary, since these naturally pull this piece down to the bar. If you've got decent equipment and you've made decent cuts and made sure things are at 90 degrees, this shouldn't be an issue. If you have really loose joints here with your tenon into this dado cut into your style, it may be an issue, but I've never really had a problem with it. Remember a couple of minutes ago I was talking about I like to keep this rail a little proud of my stiles, if anything, because it's easier for me to kind of tap them in with a mallet as I tighten this up a little bit. Well, if you happen to go too far, instead of trying to hit in here and maybe causing a mar, sometimes you can flatten down those wood fibers in there and you don't realize it. When you go to stain that, they've been mashed down and they won't soak up stain as well as the rest of the material. You could also damage your edge here. Now, you could take a waste block, like a 3/4 inch block, set that thing in here, something like this, cut you a shoulder in it. When you got a higher edge over here, and tap that thing out like that. But what I find works pretty good is just take a quick grip, put this thing on the outside, and just squeeze that thing, and it'll squeeze right in line. Get in line, turkey. But anyway, so you can do that on both sides. You can have another one out, handy, and you can squeeze those things into place, and it lines up really good. Just make sure you don't you line these up on the tips. Otherwise they'll pop out. These it'll go bang, like that, and they'll fly off on you. All right, let's get back to wood glue, or wood putty rather. All right, we're back. So I just did put on some wood putty, or wood filler. Excuse me, this is not putty, wood filler. I'm using some DAP stuff I got at Home Depot. This is, I believe, a water-based product, but it's stainable and paintable. Okay. Your solvent-based stuff they work well also. And just a couple good things now that I'm here. Be a good neighbor, and when you're done with this thing, all right, be a good neighbor. Clean this off around here. The reason is this thing won't seal good, and if that doesn't seal good, your neighbor comes in here to use wood putty or wood filler, and it's hard. Not being a good neighbor. The other thing is, when you're trying to get the caps sometimes get stuck on this thing, don't use a knife or a blade or something. Somebody sabotaged my glue tip here, and made things quite messy for me. Be a good neighbor. Think about your buddy in the shop. All right, so let's take a little close-up look here. All right, you can see I've got wood filler in there. Now, this is a good thing to do if you're painting. Let me find my pointer. Here it is. So, if you're painting, when you paint these doors, a lot of primer is going to get soaked into the end grain here of your stiles. See, this is all edge grain here. This is end grain, so it's going to soak in a lot of paint. So I like to go ahead and just put some wood filler to seal off those tubules, because I won't have to worry about going back over my end grain with a lot of sanding, or like a fine sander or fine sandpaper. It really speeds up the paint process. The other thing for you astute woodworkers, you know that when you stain end grain on something like this, let's say you're making a tabletop, you know, and at one end you're going to have end grain, and then along the edges, of course, you'll have an edge grain. Well, if you don't sand this end grain a couple of grits finer than what you did everything else, this is going to be darker. So this, you know, might be using a dark walnut stain, and it looks nice and pretty. Then dark doo-doo brown right here. It just doesn't look good. It looks like you don't know what you're doing. To get a good consistent color, if you sanded this to 220, you probably need to sand this part to 400, or any of the edge grain to 400. So I kind of do this just through experimentation. This actually works pretty well to seal this end off, for the same reason the paint, it won't soak up as much paint. It will also not soak up as much of the stain. All right, so we're going to have a dark stain, so we want it to be a consistent color as much as possible, transitioning from our edge grain, or from our edge on our rail to the tip or the end of our stile. Because remember, this is a door, right? So this is going to be the top, or it could be the bottom. This is going to be the top of our door. So if it's on a base cabinet and you go open that up, well, you want to see a nice consistent color here. Okay. So just a couple of tips. Now, I'm finished with this door. What I might do, a lot of times, you really only need to have these glued up, 30-40 minutes, and you can take them out of the clamps. It doesn't mean you can do anything else with them. It just means after 30-40 minutes, you can take them out of the clamps. And looking at my trusty watch, it is 6:11. So I'll take a piece of tape and I'll write 6:11 on here, and I'll take this. Where'd it go? It's over here. I'll take this. Imagine I wrote the time on here, and it says 6:11, and I can set this thing up on the floor somewhere out of the way where someone won't trip over it. This is probably not a good spot, but somewhere out of the way. And then I can grab another set of clamps and just keep gluing up. And what you'll find out is it probably takes, probably 10-15 minutes if you get rolling pretty good and no one sabotaged your glue. Sabotage if no one's done that to you, then you can roll through these and get these glued up, you know, every 10 to 15 minutes. So in theory, by the time you get to your third, or certainly by your fourth one, you can take this first door out. So imagine you have 3 or 4 of these stacked up. You can take this one out of the clamps and you can reuse these clamps on your next door, and then go stack that door up somewhere else to let it dry. It needs to dry probably, I'd say 3 hours, depending on humidity, before you try to start sanding with it. Okay. So you don't have to have a lot of space to make doors. It helps, but you know, I could have stacked all these up on some sawhorses somewhere. You know, you don't have to have a huge amount of workspace, and you don't have to have a lot of clamps. Well, it's starting to rain outside. You don't have to have a lot of clamps. Get like 3 or 4 sets. If you want to start making some doors, do 3 or 4 sets, and you're good to go. All right, that about does it. This is a long video, sorry. We will, there we go. Gosh, look at that mullet. Woo! Time for a haircut. What do you think? The camera's over here. It's really weird looking at these phones. But anyway, guys, we already have other videos about sanding. The nice thing is we have an edge sander now, so we can really knock these edges down and get the tops and the bottoms matched up really well on those rails. Camera 2. All right, get those the ends of our stiles and our rails, get them matched up really well. Get the saw marks out that are right here. All right, get that stuff taken care of, and then probably start with some 120. Probably start with 120 on the orbital sander to see how that works, because most of these, since I've done them, most of these joints should be pretty close. Okay, so we shouldn't have to do a lot of sanding. Use the flashlights. Watch the other videos. Use the flashlights to shine across the face of those face frames, and make sure you get all those track marks from the planer out of them. Or if we've used a drum sander on some of these rail and style parts, make sure that all of those lines are gone. And you're going to spend most of your time on that rougher grit, that 120 grit. That's where you need to spend most of your time, because if you do a good job there, actually you need to do a perfect job there, because if you go ahead and start going through your sanding sequence from 120 to 150 to 180 or 220, then you're going to find out it feels really smooth, but when you go to put the stain on it or the paint or whatever, you're going to see those lines. They'll show up. And one other thing I'm forgetting to mention, I remember what it was. So these let's flip this around again. Sorry, it's an even longer video. Remember, these are going to get stained a dark color. Matter of fact, it's going to look something like this. This is real dusty. This is one, this is from a house that kind of got beat up from painters, dang painters and sheetrockers. But anyway, so it's going to be a kind of a dark color like that. And what you want to do when you're trying to get dark colors is don't sand stuff to 300 grit. You sand it to maybe like 150, 180 at most, because the more you sand it, the softer, or the smoother it feels. The smoother it feels, the less color it's going to absorb. For the very same reason we talked about the end of the stiles on this particular piece. They'll look darker when you stain them if you don't sand them to a smoother grit. Same thing. So we don't want to sand it so smooth where the wood can't soak in the stain color that we want. Okay, I've talked enough. You've got enough to make excellent doors. We should be able to make shaker doors. This shouldn't be something that scares us. We should have confidence in being able to do this. Hacksaw Jim Duggan. Bye.